Welcome to the Honest Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. Welcome to another faction reaction for Idneth Deepkin today, and I'm joined by Chris Welfare. What a wonderful person. Can't tell you how excited I am to have him on the show. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks, mate. Yeah, just same before, in making the most of unemployment and painting lots of sea creatures and deepkin for this army and getting loads of test games in of AOS 3. So yeah, in a good place.
Honestly, can't wait to hear your thoughts on this because I know because when you're excited about a faction, I think we all get a little bit of a boost emotionally from the faction. So I'm really excited about this. You also just want to let everyone know you also run loads of events over in Australia, right? So like competent and aware of the scene as is.
Yeah, I do one a
Oh,
year,
what?
kind of a big one. Yeah, Sydney Slaughter have been doing it for the last like 4 or 5 years. I don't know. People maybe question my competency this year, as I said that Anvils of Apotheosis was okay. It turned out it wasn't.
I thought it was a great idea. I thought it was a great idea.
Oh, who cares? It was the end of an edition. Who gives a fuck?
It was fine. uh, okay, good. Now, if you guys are joining us on YouTube and you haven't watched us before, you'll join us. We're a podcast also. You can listen to us as a podcast. And we're also live on Twitch right now, where we always record these and in front of an amazing audience like Halalex in the chat. What up, Stu Redacted, who just resubscribed. Pino, Dwarf Penguin, Scott B. Scott B, a big fan of the crab. He's a big Idneth Deepkin fan as well. His Idneth Deepkin army is gorgeous, so I think he wants to hear about the crab and as much crab things as he can get. Chris, I don't know if you're going to... Is it going to be 45 minutes on the crab and then maybe 2 minutes on eels? Is that what we're looking at?
Or maybe Crab Nos, which is my one. I've got Gotrek riding a crab.
That works. That works. That's
So
perfect. Thank,
yeah, we can talk about that for
I
a
would
bit.
love to. Thanks, TycoNX, for resubscribing. Big love to you. So, Chris, before we go in and talk about Idneth Deepkin in Age of Sigmar 3, let's talk about them in Age of Sigmar 2. Like, can you talk to me about them in Age of Sigmar 2? Like, your thoughts and feelings on them as an army? How did they do? What, like lists and stuff did we see?
Yeah, I think like I didn't play them in tournaments loads in two, personally, but I mean Idneth are one of those armies that I think has always been strong in every kind of iteration. The core mechanics they have, especially in terms of like shutting down shooting, has always been, I guess, problematic to any kind of shooting army. Typically, all the armies we've always seen that did well in AOS 2 were kind of eel spam and tended to be, certainly towards the end, much more building into that MSU kind of eels. A mix of Ishlane and the Morsar as well for the defensive and also the offensive. Offensive probably being the key word. In terms of those eels, just the mobility that army has in terms of being movement 14. Everyone knows about High Tide. You hit turn 3 and then just go, yeah, fucking elves, turn 3, let's kill everything.
It's true. It's
Um,
true. I mean, I like, so one of the things that I've always said about Idneth Deepkin is that every single update is always a buff to Deepkin somehow.
yeah.
Like even points going up, like it's always a buff. And they've been, and just talking about the stat center because obviously we do the stat center every Monday, and I've covered competitive like stats for Age of Sigmar since like started 4 maybe 4.5 years ago. They've always been in like the 60% plus bracket. I think there was a single time when they dropped like to 58%, but generally they've been one of, if not the most competitive army in the meta every single edition. And could you talk about like the key elements of that, Chris? Like why you think they did so well in previous like iterations?
Yeah, I mean, high mobility for a start, and then also the ability to do kind of kill key targets with high damage output, obviously coming in from those Morsar. The ability to trigger mortal wounds as well, pretty reliably from those Morsar. They had it earlier on in the game than a lot of armies as well, so they always had that edge. The tides kind of giving them things like run and charge, and then an entire army just striking first. It They were one of the armies that was up there with the activation wars when all that kind of came in. Their ability, I think, to make multiple charges and just pin units in to go on the ends of units, for example, to mess up pile-ins and mean that they could put a lot of their damage output from a small kind of corner point on a big unit and be able to focus all that damage from 3 eels and only cop retaliation from a few models back. And then I think when they just introduced the changes in, was it
Yep.
Marathi? all they did was push the power of the army up just by making everything else that wasn't as good as Morsar really good. But I think it didn't necessarily do what they wanted it to do in terms of go, oh, people can stop taking Morsar now because they'll take this other stuff. It's like, no, 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 you've just made Morsar better now by making sure that they can have +1 to hit, or like +1 save rather. They can get +1 to wound from the Eidolon. Then they just made the sharks make people not be able to pile in whatsoever when you shoot nets at people. I'm surprised Nathan doesn't play Deepkin, to be honest, because he loves nets. So
He does love nets so much. But I think unless a Grot's throwing him, he's livid. He's livid about the existence of other nets generally. And also, can I just say, like, just side note, this is me taking us on a tangent for a moment, but weird. You would think of all things fish people would be like really anti-nets.
anti-net.
Yeah, you would think, but I guess maybe they're like so used to nets. It's like part of their like general like cultural milieu. Maybe never mind. Let's go back to facts and not weird fish.
Maybe they just decided to embrace it and go, no, we're going to make nets great again.
Yeah, the Met Netter, or the Net Meta. Oh god, I got that wrong way around. Okay, yeah. So like the updates in Marathi, right? What updates do we see in Marathi? Because obviously we haven't had a new book for it in AOS 3 yet. So what was it that changed specifically in Marathi that kind of like pushed the army around?
So the Leviathan, I think, was the big change that made Leviathans want to be taken in almost every army, I think, in terms of changing the buffs that it gave in terms of giving +1 save to everything within range of its Void Drum that was kind of 8 or less wounds. So it would increase the Eel saves, it would increase your Namati saves, increase your Shark saves, increase your Kings. It just a flat +1 save, and it wasn't cover, which it used to be. So it could stack with cover, which Deepkin traditionally get in the first round as well. So it's like, cool, set up on the board, your whole army's basically got +2 save, just as long as you hug this big 2+ save turtle. And then that gave all of the Namati, which was stuff that people weren't taking as much, like the Thralls, +1 to hit as well they were in range of that buff. And I think it just gave them a monster as well. Not that monsters were super important in 2, but more going forward into 3. I think monsters are going to be more important as well.
Yes.
But the big change I think that came in the Marathi book was really the sharks with the net launchers. It was certainly the one that everybody talked about, and the shark was the kind of tech piece that people started to try and slot into any order army where they could, like Cities of Sigmar, taking it and combining that with Star Drakes and stuff like that in terms of using the you can't pile in, then a Star Drake bites models out and breaks coherency and things like that. I think that the shark net launcher change was the big tech piece that kind of came in with Marathi.
And also was fairly unique at the time, right?
Well. Yeah, I don't think there was much really that stopped pile-ins, certainly from the range that the sharks could stop pile-ins, in terms of the range of the net launcher plus the sharks move of 14 odd. Like it was a big threat range to just, and all you had to do was hit, right? And then no pile-ins, which is massive. A lot of armies used pile-ins for movement as well. Like those half guard blocks and stuff like that would use those double pile-ins to move 6 inches across the board because they didn't move very fast otherwise.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think the other thing that I think maybe the net launchers got a lot of internet time. But one of the things that like struck me, having covered some TTS events post the Marathi book, and shout out to Forgive if he's in the chat or if he watches this back, because I saw him play it at one of the events. Razor Shell harpoons are not bad either. They got a buff, they got an extra attack, and like if you stack them, you can do some stuff with the Razor Shell harpoons, which is like I genuinely, like, they were obviously, again, super competent as an army, but they really didn't need some competent shooting in addition, but they definitely got it. They were like, you could have this as well. And like those utility pieces like Skink, Shoot, and Fight, like, to have the Alapexes, so the sharks, shoot and fight very well, was just a great switch up for the army as well if they wanted to play a different way, like, which kind of blew my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, and the change on the Eidolon of the Storm as well, to give +1 to wound instead of reroll ones. I think it used to give reroll ones within like a 9-inch bubble, and then they changed it to +1 to wound, shooting and combat hollow within
Hmm.
18, which is absolutely massive on that model. So just most of the time you can have pretty much your entire army just +1 to wound. And so yeah, talking about the shooting as well, that's where it made the Leviathan really good, because I think the Leviathan got hefty points drops as well, and that comes with the eight shots, which is essentially 2 sharks worth of the shooting. That was what, threes and threes with Rend with 24-inch range. So essentially you just take the Eidolon as well, and you're talking threes and twos just from a turtle. And yeah, you started to see people taking the Leviathan plus multiple sharks because they also were pretty cheap towards the end of two. So you started to see people that weren't just crazy people like Ben Spinetti that was running 8 sharks from the start, just actually going 8 sharks is good now.
Very good. Yeah, like I was just
So,
someone's asking
yeah.
in the chat right now how many sharks at the moment. I actually printed myself out a shark army, so I've gone max 8. I don't know if you would kind of agree with that. Puts you at 1,000 points. You could have 4 blocks of 2 potentially if you wanted to go that way. I think that's probably as many as you would want to go. Like 8, maybe 6 is probably better.
Yeah, we might disagree there because yeah, we'll get onto it. The stocks of sharks for me have gone down
Okay.
a
All
lot.
right. Amazing. Yeah, that's good.
But yeah,
All right, well, we will talk about that. Okay, so Inet Deepkin, just a quick takeaway line for everyone at home who's new. One of, if not the best combat army in Age of Sigmar. Doesn't have to be 3.0 or 2.0, just in Age of Sigmar. Incredibly mobile, incredibly useful, all orientated around a turn 3 and them sharks. Big shout out to Age of Something, who has a YouTube channel who very much described it as get to turn 3, win the game. Which was good. All right, so before we go and talk about the big winners and losers in iNet Deep King, Chris, Age of Sigmar 3, I know you've already played a bunch of practice games, or just a bunch of games anyway, and also you're one of those people who reads well to application on the tabletop. That's something that's always impressed me about you. So what are your like hot takeaways and thoughts about Age of Sigmar 3 at the moment?
the big one I think where the skill cap is going to come in is the battle tactics each turn, and picking the tactics in an order that isn't just what's the easiest one to complete in turn 1 and 2. It's actually thinking about the order of what are you going to be trying to do in 4 and 5, and making sure that you can complete them, because it's stuff that I'm starting to come up with. Like if the game's going super well and you've say tabled your opponent in turn 3,
Mm-hmm.
if all of the tactics you've got left are kill the enemy general, kill battle line, kill monster, you're screwed.
Yep.
And so you're losing yourself those 2 points, potentially even 3 points later on in the game if you can't achieve those tactics. Whereas you might want to leave stuff like have 2 units in your opponent's territory, because if you have tabled them by that point, you can just then run them to the backboard or whatever. And I think that the nuance of knowing which tactics to select to make sure that you can do a tactic in all 5 turns is going to be the big thing that starts to differentiate the podium, especially if people start taking on the score differential like document that you just put out a few days ago, which is going to be it's going to really reward the people that score as big as possible differential, and that is going to rely on people scoring tactics every single turn. And I think you really, that for me is where the like real skill cap I think is going to come in. Remembering that you can go +1 to hit and +1 to save is like, I don't know if you know that, Rob. It's not been talked about a lot. Um, but remembering that is like, sure, I think that's going to be oh yeah, okay, I can do +1 to hit or +1 to save. But like that stuff's the bread and butter of AOS 3. But I do think the tactics, and also I think some of the movement changes, the fact that a lot more stuff is like um, essentially impassable to stuff that doesn't fly, is going to be a big change to people. And around the pylons, like that's changed in that obviously you can just slide around units in terms of if you're just moving closer to the closest unit, that's fine. But I think a lot of people have felt that that's more flexible than it necessarily is, because you still have to do it on a like model by model basis, move towards the closest unit. So if you still got 2 units come in, people can still do that annoying thing where they can force your pile-ins if you want to mess up your coherency so you can't do it. It's not going to be as loose and free as I think people want, but I think it will help just make people be able to go, cool, this back rank can get in. If I'm fighting this unit, you don't have that weird situation where this guy can't fight because he's just stood here. You can kind of slide someone off to the side and put him in.
Yeah.
Which I think is good. But yeah, for me, the battle tactic has been the big one that's making me think the most at the start of every turn. It's not just about going, okay, I just want to score some objectives, and then just be killing my opponent. It's literally just making decisions also to stop your opponent scoring them. Like I've had it come up where because my opponent's gone, I'm choosing to take this objective off you, and at the start of their turn, they've said or to kill that battle line unit. And I've just gone, okay, I'm just, no matter what I do, I'm going to save my CP so that I can go +1 save on that unit. I'm just going to keep the unit champion alive. And as long as I've got a CP, I know their attacks have failed. The only thing that matters for me to do this turn is use a CP to guarantee that I pass that battle shock test. And I know that that person hasn't scored their battle tactic for 1 turn. And that's massive. It's just changing the game in terms of where you would have wanted to, like the value of your command abilities. Like putting +1 to hit on a unit of dudes that are going to put out 80 attacks might not be as important as just
denying 2
passing
points.
battle shock for one man because you deny 2 points. Because you just can't, you get to the point where you cannot get these huge leads that you used to get. And you also then can't catch up. Which I think is the real big change that excites me. I think because you really do have to think multiple turns ahead in terms of getting those tactics and then always going, how am I going to, which ones your opponent's already done as well. So you're trying to think which ones could they do and what can you do to stop them. So.
I think it also ties into 2 core things. One, Age of Sigmar has always been that way anyway. Like, if you talk to a lot of competent Age of Sigmar players, they either don't mind and or love the double turn or the priority roll specifically, like the mechanic, and it's because they're thinking a couple of turns ahead, like if X happens, X, Y. And I think the battle tactics really just play into that mentality anyway. They already play in the way that you want to play. So I love the ordering, and I think it's a great point. The other thing I'd like to highlight, which I agree with you, like planning your battle tactics ahead of time in kind of like a long-term game. But I also feel like planning your CP usage is pretty massive. Like just being aware, like it's a bit of a, like obviously a joke and a meme, turn 1, let's both roll 4+ for an extra CP. A lot of people also forget that CP is usable only by the character that like generated it as well. Like that's something that I see forgotten a lot. But the other kind of core thing is that like there is more CP, but there isn't loads of CP, and there are, like you said, loads of things you want to do with them, but not loads you can do with them. And I was playing like compared to a couple of weeks ago, I was at a tournament for Age of Sigmar 3, and I wasn't using the CP on any characters, so I was just using them for every core mechanic sort of change. And then going into last weekend, I was using them on a character every turn, and I felt a lot CP poorer. And so one of those things to plan for is, very, very, like, I think that's one of the other things that people are going to get maybe caught out with. Like, you could even, like, not bully people, but, like, you could kind of be like, oh, you're gonna redeploy? They're like, oh, yeah, I'll redeploy. I'll be like, yeah, good, you're not going to have a CP for Inspiring Presence later. Got you.
Yeah. Yeah, CP, I was going to say CP starvation is a thing I'm already seeing. There's things I'm specifically doing as well to try and force people to use CP so that in a phase, so that I know that they're going to start running out through a turn. Like shooting units where you know that they want to go +1 save. And I'm probably not going to do that much damage that turn, but it's because I'm then going to shoot some chip off units as well that I want to battle shock, but I'm then going to, in the combat phase, target the unit with something with Rend. So again, I know they're going to want to use +1 save, otherwise I'm going to put them at a threat. And I'm probably making these decisions knowing I'm not going to kill that hero because they can +1 save, but they're going to burn through their 2 CP, and now they don't have a CP to auto pass battle shock for that unit that I also threw some chip damage into. And that's definitely come up. Like opponents as well, not having them even just for stuff like reroll charges and things like that. You get to the point where they've already burnt through them in a turn or two. And I think it's quite weird as well if the choice, as you say, like everyone at the moment is just going, okay, I'll do the 4-up, get a CP. One, it's only for that turn as well, not that battle round. So if they don't use it that turn, it's gone. And I think a lot of the time I've seen people just add it onto their CP for the battle
Yeah.
round. And then if they haven't used it, it's like, okay, well, that one's gone now. So you need to remember to take it off if they didn't use
Yeah.
it. But then I think it's yeah, I've just completely lost my train
It's
of thought for
okay.
some reason.
Don't worry.
But yeah, I've just said CP too many times and my brain's gone.
Well, let's move on. Any other thoughts about AOS 3 before we talk about winners and losers for Deepkin?
Um, I think it's interesting that they've gone with Gur in terms of that they've just given every single army the ability to go fight at the top bracket for a CP.
Yes.
Because that's something you can miss as well, because it's tucked away on this small little page. It's not necessarily the key thing, but the ability to just let any monster go, I'm going to fight on top bracket, is potentially massive. Things like Durthu as well. Like, I'm not saying Sylvaneth are great again. That's not what I'm saying. But the issue with him is that it's always been as soon as he takes 3 wounds, he goes from 6 to D6, which is a huge swing. But now, if you had him alive and he's only got 1 wound left, but you can just be like, cool, I'm going to fight at 6 damage. It is a threat people are going to have to consider a lot more. It keeps monsters dangerous, and you are going to see more monsters. Whereas I think you used to be able to almost like, other than Scarbrand, you used to be able to essentially neuter monsters by doing a bit of damage to
Yeah.
them. Like, a lot of monsters bracketed terribly, and I think you now have to just consider all monsters at top profile.
Mm-hmm.
If something's great at top profile, even if it's only got a 5+ save, which normally would have made it awful, like Hell Pit Abominations, the issue is like they seem great at the start, but they bracket terribly and they've only got a 5-up save. But now, if that Hell Pit's left, you've left it on 1 wound left, and it can just go, I'm going to fight a top bracket. It will fuck hard.
Yeah.
Like, it's a real thing to consider, I think, in not completely neutering them. Is probably the only other thing that I don't know if we've seen to full effect yet. But you can also play around that. You can chip stuff down, because if they want to fight a top bracket, then they can't give themselves +1 to hit or can't give themselves +1 to save in that same kind of combat phase, because obviously they've used that CP to fight at the top bracket.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and again, it's using CP. It's drawing CP out of your opponents so they run out.
Yeah, it's a good question in the chat, is whether or not I would try harder to get, like, would you try harder to get more CP into your list potentially? And I think, like, I wouldn't make that the focus. I wouldn't like make my list weaker to do so. But if it's available, I think it's very optional. Like, more and more, like, I love Mystic Shield plus All Out Defense. It just makes every unit basically +1 save, ignore rend 1, which is wild. Yeah, like, and that actually works really nice. And then other stuff like +1 to hit, like +1 to hit on units that were already good is now bonkers. So like because they're just better. So yeah, I'm with that 100%.
Yeah.
All right,
Simon, I think Simon said it on your show the other day. Anything with a 3+ base save, or 2+, but anything with a 3+ base save is honestly, I think, 100% better than something on a 4+ save, just because of the fact that something on a 4+ save can never save on better than a 3 on the dice. So at least a third of every single wound roll you force through onto them to have to save, they should be failing.
Yeah.
Whereas something on a 3+ can just keep saving on 2s, and then it's only 1 in 6. And it's, as you say, it's so easy to save stack now with Mystic Shield. On heroes, you've got their finest hour. If you've got a few, you can just cycle through each turn. And then all that defense, obviously, like, it's so easy to get to those 1+, 0+ saves where you're basically ignoring rend. But yeah, stuff that starts on a 4 or a 5, it can't. And so you're either going to start seeing ludicrously high rend, or builds predicated around loads of mortal wounds, or you're just going to see sheer volume of attacks. I don't think you're going to see like a middle range of attacks with an army that's just loads of rend 1
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, I agree. I hugely agree with that. I think how you build your list is going to be very different to the future, and also like timing is going to be one of those interesting ones as well. Like because someone can Mystic Shield and then in their finest hour a monster, and it's all gone in together and it's all buffed up, and you're like, this isn't the turn to fight it, so I should just screen it off and other stuff. I agree with you. I think like timings and how lists are built are going to be very interesting, and some armies are just going to be difficult to ever even play against. Nagash, Archeon. You're like, can I kill that? I'm not sure. All right, so let's talk about Deepkin. Winners and losers for Deepkin. I mean, always winners. Is there ever a loser? Let's start. Who?
There's a big loser.
Okay.
There is a
Well,
big
so
loser.
who wins? Who wins? Do you think, or what wins? And one of the things we didn't.
For
Oh, go
me,
on after you.
sorry, go,
I was
go,
going to say
go,
one
go.
of the things we didn't talk about was the allegiance ability, and I know JP brought it up in the chat. So the allegiance ability, Forgotten Nightmares, so you can only target the closest unit in shooting. I mean, that's huge. I don't know if that was going to come up in your winners section, but obviously a lot of us are talking about how good shooting is going to be because of Unleash Hell. And I wonder if that factors into some of your thinking, like initially. Is it one of the things you're thinking about?
I've not put it in my winners just because it's not changed,
Yeah,
and it's always been one of the things that has made Deepkin consistently at the top because it is so hard to play them if your army is predicated around a lot of
yeah,
shooting, because it's so easy for Deepkin to just essentially shut your army down
yeah,
by just feeding it. Even if it's just feeding it crap, you literally can just go, here's 10 thralls. It doesn't even need to be 10 thralls. It could be some allied in like ether wings, and you're like, cool, I can deploy, let you go first, and all you're going to do is shoot off those ether wings.
yeah,
Even if you had a big block of, say their only shooting in range was a block of 9 storm fiends, cool, 9 storm fiends, you can kill 3 ether wings this turn.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's that they have so much resilience by damage mitigation just in terms of forcing like board control and what stuff can shoot, and because you control movement and you control the end of your turn. For me anyway, certainly going forward, the thing for Deepkin is I've never wanted to get double turned with them. I always want to be able to just control the game. I'm super happy with Deepkin for myself to never ever have a double turn either,
mm,
and just keep the game going. You go, I go, you go, I go. Because I'm always finishing my turn with my army in a position where I'm like, I'm cool if I like I'm cool if I don't win this priority roll. And to be honest, I probably don't want to roll it because I don't want to take a double.
yeah,
You can just have it because I'm set up in a position that your shooting is going to shoot this and this and this that I've tied into it, and I'm okay with that. So that has always been one of Deepkin's main strengths, and it hasn't changed in 3. They didn't change that rule in the FAQs. The only thing they did around that rule was change the Cloud of Midnight artifact, which was the most common thing you always saw on an Eidolon usually, which was the once per game at the start of any phase, you can basically use the cloud and the model can't be targeted that
mm,
turn. And so people would chuck this Eidolon up as the closest unit into a shooting army and then go, oh, by the way, you can't shoot this turn, and it's still counted as the closest
yeah,
unit. So you literally turned everything in that army off in terms of shooting that turn. And they didn't get to do anything. They didn't get to like kill a unit at all. And your Eidolon was right up there. Whereas now they've changed it to say if you do want to do that, they're no longer counted as the closest unit.
which is a huge nerf.
So you can. It's big. It's interesting because it's actually like I in my practice games I was taking the Eidolon and I was taking the cloak, and I never used the cloak. I just never found I needed it because it stops you fighting as well. And I wanted to fight, and I was always controlling. I didn't want to just send him up to get shot anyway. So I probably played like 6 games, and I never used it once. And then I've changed it, and I've now put one of the generic artifacts, the Arcane Tome, onto him to make him a wizard, because the Eidolon becoming a wizard, I think, is fantastic. That the fighty one because he didn't go up points, and the wizard one did, and he has the massive aura of +1 to wound. And I just think he's by far and away the better of the 2 Eidolons, and he's cheaper. And now you make him a wizard, and he's always able to Mystic Shield himself or whatever to put him on a 2-up base save, ready to go all out defense if he needs to. He naturally heals when he retreats and charges, heroic recovery to heal again. if you need to. He's a real good piece. High movement, decent rend and damage, really consistent on his attacks as well. He's got a built-in way of getting +1 to hit against heroes of 8 or less wounds, so he doesn't need to use all-out attack on himself. So you've always got the ability to just go all-out defense or use the all-out attack on another unit in the army as well. And he's basically 2s and 2s on his attacks with Ren 2, damage 3 on the charge with 5 attacks. Like he's super consistent. He's not going to go in and like Merc Archaon in one go, but he's just really good for positioning again with that.
Few things are though, right?
Piece.
I was having this discussion yesterday with my friend Mark. I played another game yesterday, and one of the things we were talking about is like you just don't have answers to an Archaon or an Nagashans in most cases. Like, and you have to just like be real, like we talked about with Math Mallow on the Sylvaneth show. You just have to be like, cool, I'm never going to kill. I'll kill the stuff around him, but I'll never kill that, which is kind of an interesting take. Like agree with you 100%. All right, sorry, I kind of like took you on a side one there, but it was brilliant points, so I loved that. I was just listening. I was like, all great points. So what was your big winners? Sorry, what were your big winners?
The biggest winner for me is Reavers.
Okay, so why? What were they like before, and why have they changed so significantly?
They were okay, but I think in the Deepkin book they were just the one that you just never took, because to be honest, eels or whatever were better in terms of your units when you were probably taking a king, and then you started to take sharks and an eidolon and a leviathan and stuff. You just didn't really find the points for them. But now they are so good. Anything when I've like gone through all the points of what's changed, anything that stayed the same or got cheaper immediately deserves a second look, just because everything essentially got more expensive.
Yep.
And so anything that didn't get more expensive naturally should be stronger than it was before.
Yep.
And Reavers went down 5 points.
Oh, wow.
So they're only 115 points now. But the other big change is they used to have a max unit size of 20. But now, if you have them as battle line, obviously you can double reinforce. So you can actually take a block of 30 Reavers, which you could never do before. And so 30 Reavers, and basically what they have is their Whisper Bow is either 18-inch range for 1 shot or 9-inch range for 3 shots. And so for stuff like Unleash Hell, if you take 30 Reavers, it's only 345 points. And they're going to be within 9 inches if something charges them. So then you're unleashing 90 shots. And so when I was saying before, I think one of the strategies going forward will be just overwhelming weight of dice to push through wounds onto high saves. It doesn't work against stuff like Nagash or Archon. Anything that has that ability to be 2+ rerolling 1s or 2+ rerolling whatever, it won't work against them. But anything else, even the big monsters on a 2+ save, you put 90 shots onto them and you can make them pretty consistent as well. You just force so many save rolls that they actually just start taking damage just through the amount of ones they roll to save. And for how cheap the Reavers are, the ability to put that output through is just massive. And it also gives you board control as well in just loads and loads and loads of bodies. And they're not terrible in a fight either. They have 2 attacks that are 3s and 4s. And so you can get them to 2s and 3s because you can obviously give them +1 to hit, either from a Leviathan just being in range of the enemy. Because they're Namati, they naturally get +1 to hit if they're in range of that Leviathan's buff. So then that puts them hitting on 2s in combat. And then if the Eidolon's nearby, they're wounding on 3s. And they've got 2 attacks each. And obviously, when High Tide rolls along, they can all fight first anyway. So in that turn, you can go in, you can run them up, you can shoot with them, and then you can just charge them into combat as well if you want and do a butt ton of attacks. And so for me, like I've been using a lot of Reavers in my games, and they have just been phenomenal for just what they let you do. That 9-inch bubble.
What's the shooting profile?
It's 4s and 4s.
Okay, no rend.
No rend, 4s and 4s, either 18-inch range for 1 shot or 9-inch range for 3 shots. They move 8, which is great for foot infantry.
So 17 inches for the 3 shots.
Yeah, if you just want to move them. But Deepkin, you can go in Flood Tide, you run and charge or run and
Is that
shoot.
two? Turn two?
Well,
Oh.
I'll say yes,
We'll say yes for
but
now, but we'll talk about that later.
for now,
Okay. So
yeah.
turn two. So turn two, I could push up. Wow. Like I could push up
And
like.
they naturally re-roll run rolls as well on their scroll.
Really? That's so good. Okay.
So you're naturally pushing to the fours, fives, and sixes on your
You're gonna talk.
runs. And so
You could,
say it's a
yeah.
four, you're going 12, you've got a 21-inch threat on your triple shots, or like a 30-inch on your single shots,
Yeah.
and they're pretty good. Like I say, you can get +1 to hit without needing to use all out attack if you've got the Leviathan in range of the target. They get +1 to wound as well from the Eidolon. You can get reroll ones to hit in the army for quite easily through different ways.
Reavers. I'm. This is blowing my Reavers. Okay, fine. Okay, next
So
time
I
I
I
can't wait to hear
I,
about Lotan. I'm so excited.
I well, yeah,
Okay.
Lotan's on there.
Okay. All right, amazing. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, I played 60 Reavers yesterday in a game against 9 Storm Fiends with a bridge. In turn two, I could have killed a unit of 12 Storm Fiends. I overkilled them so much, there could have been 12, and this was turn two, and they were all dead.
I am shook. It's how I feel emotionally shook. Like, can I tell you one thing I didn't want, Chris? Is I didn't want Deepkin to also be good at shooting. This is breaking my heart, but okay, fine.
They're honestly, they are so broken now, it's not even funny.
Okay.
Like with what they can do. It's this lit that yeah. I've been playing these lists recently. I don't know. You had Simon on and he talked about his game where he'd said that he didn't think the game was in a position where you could like have those super early losses. And then he was like, oh, I lost turn one. Holy fuck. That was against me. And this Deepkin with Reavers. And it's honestly, they are bonkers now with the
I
Reavers
hate
becoming
this.
good.
I hate this. I would like you to know I hate this. But fine. The battle line as well, right?
Battle line, yeah. So that they need to be battle
For the
line, I
30.
think, to make the most of them to get the 30
Yeah.
blocks. And so that's when the second big winner comes in, and that's the Tidecaster. Because in order to make Reaver's battle line, you just have to have an Isharan hero as your
Yeah.
general, which is essentially any of the foot characters for Deepkin. They're all Isharan. So you've got the Tidecaster, you've got Soul Scryers, which are the most powerful finger in the Mortal Realms. Just here, everything get +3 to charge. Um, Soul Scryers as well. You've got the Soul Renders and stuff as
Mm.
well. So you just basically need any Isharan hero as your general, and that will unlock the Reavers' battle line. So then the reason the Tidecaster, I think, is such a big winner is because it can have a mechanic which some people will have seen, but I don't think it was super common because typically people were taking a king like Volturnus as the general to unlock Eels as battle
Yeah.
line. But if you have a Tidecaster general, what you can do is at the start of the battle, you can flip the
Mm.
tides. And so basically it changes up the normal order of Deepkin's kind of tide mechanic. So for people that don't know, the traditional Deepkin army is that your whole army gets cover on the first battle round. Then your whole army can either run and charge or run and shoot. They can't do both, but you get to choose per unit what you want to do. Then round three comes along and your whole army fights first. Then round four comes along and your whole army gets retreat and charge.
Mm.
And then round five comes along and you go back to cover for your whole army. But what happens is if you flip the tides, it changes it. So you actually start on retreat and charge, which is super weird
Mm.
to start on retreat and charge. But then you get fight first, so you get high tide in the second round.
Mm.
And then you go to run and charge, then you go to cover, then you go to retreat and charge again.
Mm.
And so the order for that, I don't think has ever been great. But where it comes into play is if you take the Futhan Enclave, which is, yeah, for Deepkin, it's obviously, I'll go through the Enclaves a bit in terms of which ones are maybe winners or not. But the Futhan one, basically, the reason it's so good with a flip tides build is because every single time the army would be affected by Ebb Tide, which is the retreat and charge one, they get affected by Flood Tide, which is the run and charge, run and shoot.
Oh.
And so what happens in the Futhan Flip Tides build is that turn one, your entire army gets run and shoot or run and charge. Turn 2, you fight first, and then turn 3, you go run and shoot, run and
I
charge.
hate that.
Turn 4, you get cover, and then turn 5, you're back to run and shoot, run and charge. And in Futhan, whenever you're affected by that flood tide of run and shoot, run and charge, you also re-roll ones to hit, and it's shooting and combat. And so basically, turn 1, turn 3, turn 5, your entire army can run and shoot, run and charge, and re-rolls ones to hit.
That's pretty good.
Which is, yeah, it's pretty good. And then especially is like one of the most common tactics, like feeding back into how the army works around battle tactics. Everyone likes to just get done on turn 1 is, okay, I'll just run 3 units. Normally you're just running 3 units or whatever, maybe going on to some objectives. But with Deepkin, you run 3 units, you're keeping them all together because your whole army can run and charge or run and shoot anyway. So you're running just to get further towards your enemy and onto objectives, and then you can still charge or shoot. So there's basically no downside to it whatsoever. And you're also re-rolling ones to hit. And so when you start stacking up buffs in the army, it's super easy to have loads of things in the army hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s. And then as soon as turn 2 comes along, anything that's in combat, you're fighting first anyway. So you don't really care as much about the priority roll. And if you're against a shooting army, as long as you're clever with where you've put your units that you want to get shot at, as long as they're the closest, if you lose priority as well, they're just shooting those off, which typically is going to be some ish lane because they ignore rend and they're really fast, and they can be on a 2-up unrendable save. So
wow,
which is pretty bonkers. Because they start on a 4+, but they have one of the weird mechanics where when they charge, essentially they get +1 save, but the wording is their save characteristic changes to a 3+. It's not that they get +1 save, which then means that if their save characteristic changes to 3+ when they charge, if they're wholly within range of a Leviathan's buff, for example, or the leader of the unit just goes, I'm going to go all out defense, they go on to a 2+ armor save and they naturally ignore rend. And so moving into an edition where I think you're going to see people trying to put in loads of high rend into their armies, just having this unit that you can just throw in and go, I'm on a 2+ unrendable save, is crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And you have to shoot, by the way. If you've got shooting, I've just thrown this forward so you can shoot that, and it's charged you, and it's on a 2+ unrendable save.
Yeah, Ishlin, it's like we saw Tom Gilboy at the Super Series, only dropped 1 game out of 9 across the Super Series, running those 3 blocks of 3 Ishlin with the turtle behind, and he was just sticking it in front of like Beast Call Raider armies. He's like, there's 9 guys. Can you kill them? And like most often it was like, no, I can't. A whole KO army. He was like, there you go. Shoot them first, and they just couldn't. Like, they just couldn't take them off. And he was like, "Lol," like it was amazing. So yeah, so good, right?
Yeah, they're very good. But yeah, so that whole for all those reasons, the Tidecaster for me is big stonks. That's my general in all my lists now because I'm running Thuthan with Reavers as battle line because I want them as battle lines so that they can be 30s. And the Tidecaster, that's what you need, a Tidecaster general to do the flip tides. And so it's just a no-brainer for me now. And now that, I mean, she's a wizard, which is better because Deepkin traditionally never really had much magic at all. And so she's a wizard. Mystic Shield is great, and I don't really care about other spells. And now I can take the generic trait to reroll casting and unbinding and dispelling, which is super useful. To just have her being able to go, okay, cool, I'm going to unbind with a reroll built in, cast Mystic Shield if I want. I've typically been running as well the spell from the Deepkin lore, which is Abyssal Darkness. I think it's only cast on a 5, and it basically gives you a 9-inch bubble of cover as well. So in the Flip Tides build, what you're giving up really is cover, but potentially you can just cast the spell and get cover anyway. So you can kind of literally just have your cake and eat it. And she only went up 5 points, I think, for the Tidecaster. So she's only 105. So she's really cheap as well. And being the general, her command aura is at 18-inch range. And because Deepkin, all their little heroes are basically safe against shooting, it's just magic and abilities and stuff you have to watch out that's ranged that you don't get sniped off. But it's pretty easy to just keep them back and keep them safe. And having that 18-inch bubble from her is pretty usable.
Yeah, yeah, just so good, so good. Like I'm still just trying to accept a world where I'm having to face Reaver shooting. If I'm honest, like I was still emotional, but I think I agree with you having one wizard, and I think the thing that you talked about a lot there, the reroll, is huge. The reroll unbind because there's some very potent spells. The most important one, in my opinion, to be looking out for is to stop the opponent's Mystic Shield at this point because they're gonna have a plan for that every turn, and that's the one where it's a low casting value. So when they get it, they might not cast high, so you've got that chance to shut down. And I would say that you want to put a wizard or something to try and shut them down as much as possible, because that changes the balance of like an entire combat phase quite significantly, I think. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Stopping Mystic Shield is what pretty much one of my key priorities whenever I'm asking what spells my opponent can do. And also that's why when it comes to like the charge reactions, for me, Raw is still definitely the best one. If I'm going into anything that I know wants to give itself +1 save, I just want to Raw at it so that it can't get that +1 save, especially if it's not got the Mystic Shield off.
Mm.
It just makes stuff die so much quicker than your opponent was planning on. And I think there's going to be a big part of the game as well where Mystic Shield of did I cast it or not is going to start impacting your turn. Because you can be like, cool, my plan is I'm going to cast Mystic Shield and I'm going to go aggressive, I'm going to go here. But if your Mystic Shield doesn't go off, I'm starting to go, oh, I don't know if I want to send him in without a Mystic Shield now. I might keep him a bit further back because I do think that difference is massive, like you said, of whether that happens or not.
Okay, sweet. Have we got anything else in the winner column? I think we're done well already, but like, what else do we think is in the winner column?
Yeah, I touched on it before. I put the Eidolon, the combat Eidolon in.
Mm,
Just the buff aura, the fact he didn't go up in points. He's not a monster, and so I think that's probably why he didn't go up in points.
mm,
And he's not a wizard, so maybe they were thinking, oh well, he can't cast the spells, but then they gave you a generic artifact to just let him be a wizard and cast the spells, and so he stayed cheap, but now has access to a spell to make him a monster as well. In the Gur generic spells, he can turn himself into a monster
mm.
for a relatively low casting value. And then he, like I said before, he can do the heroic actions to heal himself, and he already heals himself when he retreats and charges. Very easy for him to be on a 2+1+ save. And he's got 12 wounds and a 5+ after save built in, so you don't need that Amulet of Destiny on him. So he's super hard to shift, and he's fighty enough that he's always a threat. You cannot pin him down because he's got retreat and charge built in,
Mm.
and that massive 18-inch to +1 to wound bubble synergizes so nicely with the entire army because it's shooting and combat. It works for the Reavers as well. It's really, really, really good. I just put him in every single list, and with that build now, just as being being a wizard. And I'm taking Flaming Weapon as my choice from the generic spell lore because I don't really think I need Fly. Deepkin, typically all the important stuff flies anyway.
Mm.
Um, and then I'm not gonna do the ultra abusive thing that some Deepkin players will do with Ghost Mist, with the generic spell, which I mean, we talked about how Deepkin can already severely new to shooting armies.
Mm.
The Ghost Mist generic spell lets you pick a terrain feature within, it's like a short range, it's like 6 inches. But if you can set up potentially within 6 of a big terrain feature that's kind of pushing towards the middle of the board, for example, on deployment, and you go first and you cast Ghost Mist on that terrain feature, it basically gives it the like line of sight blocking
Mm.
rules. So then you can just go put something in there, like a little hero or something that is more than 3 from the outskirts, so it can't be seen. You just put that there as the closest unit, and then your opponent has to shoot it, and they can't because they can't see it.
Yeah, that's rough. That's rough.
It's abusive as hell. So you
I
could
mean, but
do that,
you could always do that
but
as well with the Prismatic Palisade, right? Like a similar setup. You could do the same. It's like it's available. I don't think it feels like a solid tactic. It just ties in so well with the Allegiance ability, right?
yeah, you can. I think it's just, yeah, you don't. It's a very low casting value, I think, and the fact that because it's a generic spell lore, like you don't have to pay points for an endless spell or anything.
Mm.
It just, yeah, I don't know. It feels horrible to me if someone was if someone was doing that. But yeah, I've just generally taken Flaming Weapon, but I'll be honest, I've never cast it with him. I'm either casting Mystic Shield or I'm casting the one to make him a hero,
Yes.
to make him a monster. Sorry, mainly for the rampage rather than the counting as 5 models. Just
But what
because
about
it's
the
useful
additional +1 VP for the battle tactic? Has that come into effect at all?
in terms of him dying. No, because he
No,
doesn't.
I'm sorry.
He's
I'm more mean. Like, so some of the
Oh,
new,
if I achieve something with a monster as
yeah,
well, if that comes in, then great. Um, I've not been using him necessarily for that as much. The issue behind that is because you have to pick your tactic before you can cast any spells.
and he's
So
not a monster.
you don't know if you're going to get that spell off, and so I don't want to do something like monstrous takeover and then fail the
Well,
spell. And
monsters takeover you can't do via the spell because you when you choose the battle tactic you must pick a monster, and he's currently not a monster
oh
at
yeah,
that
that's right.
stage.
Yeah, yeah,
But the
yeah.
other ones where you like kill a battle line unit, so like broken flags, like you can just pick the unit you're going to kill and then decide if you're going to be a monster. It's just an opportunity cost to get an extra
To get
VP.
the extra point. Yeah,
And
yeah.
like we were talking about, like that variance, I think that's going to play in sometimes. You're going to be like, oh, actually, I'm going to definitely do that, and he's going to do it. So here's the time for the monster. And most people let you get it. Most people are like, oh, whatever, like not bothered. I think. But what monstrous reactions have you been doing with him? Like, what's been the point of it?
Raw.
Oh,
every
okay.
every time raw.
So
Like
so
it
they can't
just,
take
as I
cover.
said, it's to stop them getting +1 save
Yeah. Okay, that
because
makes
people
loads of
are
sense.
because I think people are banking on it, and that's a way you can also waste CP because you've said people are saving their CP because they're like, well, I'm saving that CP because I want to use all out defense when he comes and charges me. So then they've not used it, they've held on to it. Then you go in and basically deny them the ability to use it. You've essentially like made them have one less CP, and because they reset every battle round, that matters as well. And with the Eidolon having Ren 2, if something suddenly doesn't get a +1 to its save as well, like on a 4-up, yeah, it's just so much easier to do damage and start killing like those heroes. I just Raw for me is always the one I take.
Super fair. Okay, so what about losers? Who do we think lost in this? And it would be nice to hear some IDK losses, I won't lie.
Morsar, Morsar, but I'm biased because I've always said I've never wanted to take any
Okay.
anyway. But I think they are, compared to pretty much all the other kind of options you can take now in building the lists, they are too expensive. They're like 190, 195 now, whereas Ish Lane are 155.
Hmm.
So there's a big points difference between even just Ishlane and Morsar. And I've already said how incredible I think Ishlane are for the job they do in terms of being able to get a 2+ unrenderable save. So the fact that Morsar are 190, 195, and they come on a 4+ save means that it's that issue if they can never save on better than a 3+. They only do their damage output on the charge.
Hmm.
So and with the ability now of stuff to have higher armor saves because they're going to go all out defense, all this stuff, I think Morsar aren't going to nuke stuff off as much as they used to. And so as soon as they go in and they get stuck, they then drop to having no rend and 1 damage again. And they make one less attack that Ishlane do anyway. Like Ishlane standardly make 3 attacks per rider, whereas Morsar make 2. And so once they've gone in and they've done that initial Ren 2 damage 2 hit, if they haven't killed what they're trying to kill, like monsters or whatever, which I think more and more they won't kill them now because of the increased armor saves,
Yeah.
then they're stuck and they're stuck and they're doing less damage than Ishlane. They're way less survivable than Ishlane, and they're more expensive. So for me, Morsar are they're just out. Um, there's still an argument in the mortal wound output because the army, that is something that it kind of lacks. They're one of the only ways of mortal wounds in the army. And obviously with higher saves, mortal wounds are useful, but you typically don't have enough of them to get the volume of mortal wounds that you would want. And it's on like 3-ups. And it's only once per game for each unit that does it. So I just don't think it's enough to kind of compensate for the other kind of downsides.
I agree. I agree. I think actually that your point about the rend, like, is because that was what was very scary about them. But with the addition, with the saves everywhere now. Like they just aren't as punchy as they were because everything's tankier than it was. And so really like, but they are still cheap. They are still cheap compared. Like, I mean, other books would die, I think, for for a Morsar Guard scroll, genuinely. But I could see why, like, they definitely would seem like they've almost been almost been changed to a points value that almost resembles fair. But they're not there. Like, and I think maybe that's an interesting point, right? They were unfairly pointed. Like forever. Like, and then now they're at a place where they're just more fairly pointed now, which I think is quite interesting. And so I could see why people maybe would look around for other stuff. But I still think that they're very, very, very good. But I completely agree with you. Like, I understand your points.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's still a good scroll, and agree loads of other books would kill to have them. It's just I think the other stuff in the book is better now for the points, in terms of the changes and what got hit. Again, it's all the stuff that didn't get hit as much and didn't increase as much or offers less kind of synergy overall for me when like evaluating Deepkin as an army of what's the best stuff and what's the worst stuff. In that book, I don't think Morsara is worth it now.
Super fair. Super fair. Like, super fair. Like, and you've definitely been playing more Deepkin than I have. Big shout out to Dan Arnold, though, who was at an event here at the weekend for a team event, was running all eels. He was still like, these are fine, Rob. These are fine. With Gotrek, these are really fine. And I was like, okay. What else do you think lost in the book?
The Gloomtoad Shipwreck, I think, is honestly up there for one of the worst faction scenery pieces in the game now.
Okay.
It's
good.
Awful.
Good.
Awful.
Yeah.
I don't own one, and I'm honestly thinking I won't buy one. I don't think I need it, which is terrible. To literally say this is my faction terrain, no, I just don't need it. Like, it's
So for people who are new, like, let's talk about it for a moment, because it was almost like an unspoken about, but like really should have been spoken about, I think, a little bit more seriously, obnoxious rule. Like, you would deploy 2 large pieces of scenery in front of an opponent's army and make them have to move up and down it. And I don't think we really ever took into account how offensive and effective that was in the edition. So, like, I super agree with you, it's gone down, but I have no idea why it wasn't basically deleted from the game earlier on, because, like, I don't know how we really let it happen at tournaments, if I'm honest. This is only from a few months ago. I saw it on the tabletop and I was like, why is that allowed? I didn't think it was like the moment of realization. I was like, like, that's not cool. So that's what you used to be able to do with it, and now it's changed. How's it changed now, Chris? What's it changed to?
So you used to be able to take 2, so you can still take 2 pieces, but you used to be able to take 2 entire boats, as you said, and then put them down pretty much anywhere on the board, obviously around 3 inches from objectives, terrain, etc., the normal kind of restrictions. Whereas now you can take basically 1 boat. You can either take 1 boat together as 1 big boat, or you can take the 2 halves and put them in 2 separate places. But they have to go wholly within your territory, which is a big change, because the only person you're really going to block up now is yourself rather than your opponent. Yes, you can still use it to put it in front of your army to necessarily block an opponent that's aggressive and wants to come and try and charge you, potentially. But like, if your army also wants to move out, like, don't get me wrong, I know there's lots of stuff in the army as well that flies, so they could just fly over it. But it's more just going to get in your way, I think, than how it used to play. They took away the 6-up ward save as well that it used to provide. So if your Deepkin were like wholly within 6 of it, it used to give you a 6-up ward save, which they've got rid of. So now it's just in your hero phase, if there's enemy units within like 3 of it, on a 4-up, you do a mortal wound, on a 6, you do D3. So it just doesn't come up very often. And then the fact that it's defensible now means you can't move, like, can't go up and over it. You can't move through it. So obviously you can garrison it. So if you wanted to put it kind of near an objective, because you can put it like 3 away from objectives, so you can still put it within scoring position, and maybe put a hero in there and be like, cool, I've got +1 save and -1 to hit from sitting there. But for me, and I think generally Deacon's playstyle, is the thing that makes them super strong is how fast they are and able to move around the board. And so the issue with garrisoning anything is you're not able to, like, it's not like if you're sitting in there you can just then do your 14-inch move or whatever out of it. You have to go, my move is I'm going to end 6 inches, like within 6 of this terrain piece. And it just, Deepkin are too fast to want to do that, I don't think. And so honestly, I think the only thing I would potentially use one for is if I wanted to just spread them out, put them behind my army, just so that I could set my like Soul Scryer or Tiecaster up within like 3 inches of them to try and do the ritual, because you get a +1 if you're within range of a shipwreck. And honestly, it's probably about all I would use the boats for if I had them. Now, like I think you can use them, sure, but I don't think they definitely don't do the kind of buffs that like the Shrine Luminor gives Luminaire, for example, or like you're not recycling units or ignoring Battle Shock from like the Gloomspite one. It's honestly, I think the things that it gives you are probably some of the weakest bonuses in the game. But I think that's fine. Honestly, I don't think Deepkin need it.
Yeah, no, same.
So
I also don't think what they did before was okay. So, like, great, good change generally. I'm going to go for. Okay, have we got any more losers, or are we going to talk about some sample lists?
I don't know if they've really lost. I think just where before sharks for me are kind of when I've been writing lists, they're falling into that spot of just not really finding the points to take them now, just because I'm talking in terms of me trying to build what I think is optimal, and I keep just going, oh, that 125 points of shark I could use to change this list around to maybe put in like a life swarm and or get some true revenants and do something else that lets me have a teleport. I don't, and I wouldn't be investing in more than one shark if I did. Like the original version of the list, I had a shark in it, and then I played, and the shark was the first thing that came out.
Right.
And I've just started swapping the shark out because it was okay, but it didn't do a role in the army that I didn't already have
Yeah, I think it's
covered.
interesting that the Reaver switch up because honestly, like I'm fairly impressed about the utility of razor shell harpoon sharks, not net launcher sharks. I think you can take something like 8, and then you've got a pretty
Mhm.
solid fire base. That's 1,000 points on the nose. That's a solid fire base, but also a solid combat. Like you've got all that duality from the both of them. Like, but I think you kind of have to push into that. You can't just have like a throwaway unit of 2 maybe, because maybe they do a little bit. But I think like you could do like. I think you either go all in and that's the play style for the army that you're going to try and sit off, countercharge, or like I'm 100% with you. Like I think like the Reaver build definitely does the shooting better. Like so yeah. Anyway, like and cheaper as
I
well.
think,
Like insanely cheaper.
yeah, it's insanely cheap. I think the other thing with the sharks as well is that with the reinforcement point issue, you're ending up really taking them in singles. Depending on, I guess, your battle line or how many of your battle line or other units you've wanted to reinforce. Like if you want to take a 6-ish lane or something, that's one of your reinforcement points. And then if you want to take those 30 Reavers, that's going to use you 2 reinforcement points. And so putting those sharks up to obviously the maximum unit size they can be is 2s, but every single time you do that, you're using a reinforcement point as well. And I think them operating in 1s is good as well. For Deepkin, 1s is not a bad thing because of the whole cool. I'll just throw one shark at as the closest unit if I need it to just cop a bunch of shooting to protect the rest of my army this turn. That's great. But when you want maybe 2 of them together so that you can put an all-out attack or some other buff on them, and that you want them to both go at the same time, you're not getting with the reinforcements. I agree in terms of the loadout though. If when I did run one, I wasn't taking the net launcher, I was taking the razor shell harpoons for the range, the extra attack, and the rend. But they also got rid of their reroll charge roll off their war scroll. So they used to, like, whenever they were within 12 of a unit that had lost any models or was wounded, then they get an extra attack now, but they also got to reroll charges innately. Whereas because that's gone now, and you can obviously only use CP to reroll one charge if you want. You don't know if you want to necessarily spend it to get one shark in versus another unit that you might need to get in. And they're not elite. They don't have champions in their unit, so you need to babysit them with a hero. as well to do kind of command abilities on them if you wanted to. Which is a big downside that I didn't talk about with Reavers and Thralls, actually. They are an interesting unit because they do not have unit champions.
Oh.
All they have is icon bearers. And so they cannot issue commands to themselves. So the big thing with this army is the heroes are very important and they do have to babysit the units. So, like, that's why the Tidecast is great because it's an 18-inch range, and I've got a Soul Scryer in my list as well. Mostly because of the Priest thing, because Priest, I think, is super good now, and it's what turns the Reavers up to 11. If you curse a unit and you make any 6 to hit from your army do a mortal wound in addition when you've got the amount of output of volume of shots that Reavers do. And so that's what I played the Storm Fiends the other day. He charged into me and I got the curse off. And then I was like, they're dead. Like, I literally have got 180 shots into you right now. They're dead. Like, you're going to take at least 30 odd mortal wounds in addition to everything else.
Amazing.
So, yeah, the old Soul Scryer is still totally worth it because of the Priest keyword rather than necessarily the bonuses to charge.
Amazing.
But
yeah, so good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so my question to you is you going to do us a write-up of your list on the Honest Wargamer website so I can link it to people because people will be very excited to read that, I think, and then I can include it in the show notes because it won't go out till tomorrow. So like we could put that. We've got time maybe, although it's late there for you. I've just been sat here for like an hour enjoying listening to you talk about Age of Sigmar. If that's all right, Chris. Like, because I'm like mega into this edition. I think it's so good, and so like listening to people like you who I know, who you and me have hung out and we've done shows together as well. But I know you're super passionate about the game as is. So like it's fun to hear you be like really excited about this new thing. So yeah, like I'm very, very excited about all of this. So thank you. So if you guys are listening, you will be able to include the list that Chris the elements of the list that Chris is talking about in the show notes, so you can listen to that wherever you've listened from. Have you got any shout outs you'd like to do, Chris, before we head out today?
Yeah, I think I need to shout out Arthur Bulgaris.
Every show.
Literally never actually played the guy, but you knew it was coming. But yeah, no, I'll shout out Smorgan and Simon. Just
great human beings.
Our regular chat of everything AOS 3. It's my main. They're getting in. They're the other people that I know that I'm talking to all the time that are getting in loads of reps of 3, and we're just constantly bouncing ideas and everything. So yeah. And they put out good content. I just appear occasionally on Simon's channel when he's like, "Oh, people are complaining I'm winning too much. I need to lose a game," and I'm like, "I'm here, Simon. Oh, come on."
I got this. You push him away from those crutch Phoenix Guard one day. We'll see if he manages it.
Iron Drakes. There is big crutch. Yeah. The Iron Drakes.
I mean, everyone's big crutch. They're good. They're so good.
Who do you?
Well, everyone, I think, for a while.
I just need to. You must be aware of this. Like, if I just say Sentinels and Iliartha to you.
Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Not like
we haven't got there yet.
Like
we haven't got there. That's one of the next factions. You've already given me the title for this. Reavers are broken? ? Or exclamation mark. That's my YouTube click right there. So thanks everyone. Chris, it's been a delight. You're a treasure to the community. So thank you very much. I'll also include Chris's socials in the down below as well. So if you ever want to get at him about anything, he's based in Australia, so you guys can reach out to him. He's up in Queensland now. So if you're around that area and you want to talk to him, although I'm sure anyone around there knows him anyway. It's been a delight. Thank you. This The Honest Wargamer is filmed in front of a live studio audience who is our Twitch chat. So big shout out to the Twitch chat. You're all wonderful. And you can watch this on YouTube, or you can listen to it as a podcast, and it's all brought to you by people on Patreon. So it's all free content produced by the people from the Honest Wargamer Patreon. So thanks to you. And thanks, Chris. And thanks for listening to the Honest Wargamer. We'll see you guys soon. Have a nice day.